Welcome to Marlene's Atelier. In this lesson, we are going to be machining the lining together, and then I'm going to share my technique for basting the lining into the sleeve and creating ease, as well as turning up the length. You're not going to want to miss this lesson. That's what's happening today in the Atelier. So we're going to start working on getting our lining machined and into the actual sleeve itself. But if you remember, I told you that we have to stretch, okay, the top sleeve for the lining too. Now here's the challenge that we have, or I have, not you, that I can't use water on this lining because if I do, it'll just leave a nasty, awful, ugly stain, okay? Watermark, that looks terrible. So if that's the case, what you have to do is you just have to come in and just stretch the lining around the best you can, okay, without any water. Now, believe it or not, it'll actually stretch out quite nicely, okay? Now, as you can see here, what we have, if you can remember seeing this little mark right here, if you remember when we cut our sleeves, we left an extra 2.5 centimeters at the top above and beyond the inlay we already had, okay? So that we could come up and over and into the jacket with the sleeve, okay? So this little mark here represents this right here, okay? The top of the inside, or the top of the top sleeve, okay? So I'm just going to do my best to stretch this as much as I can. Same idea. I'm just focusing on the edge of the cloth and not coming in too far, okay? So it is stretching out a bit. Not as much as if we had water, of course, but hey, we got to do the best we can with what we have sometimes, right? Can only do so much. And, you know, I just don't want to see a big, ugly stain in my sleeve. Who does? My beautiful lining, okay? So we have that. That's not too bad. Not too bad, all right? And we'll turn it over and do the same thing on the other side. All right, so we'll just turn it, turn it, turn it. Do the best we can. And I'm just coming down and stopping at the length. Yeah, I don't need to stretch it beyond there. Okay. And turn it this way towards me. And one more time. Of course, you know, be careful with your lining. Every lining is a little different. This lining is quite thick, so I don't have to worry about pulling it a whole lot, okay? I'm not afraid of ripping it, in other words. All right, so I think that's about as good as that's going to get, unfortunately, but we'll see what we can do with it, okay? And I just want to get any wrinkles off of this. Just press this out real nice while we have our cloth here. We could take advantage of that. Okay, let's do the same thing with this piece. We're just going to give it a nice little press here. It was folded up. It's been sitting over there since we started this whole project. So for the past, you know, what, 2 or 3 months, 3 months that we've been working on this together. So of course it's going to have a few wrinkles. Okay. All right, so we've got that. Nice. Let's get rid of this. Fold it up. Put it aside underneath. What we need now, is we're going to trim some of those zhazhas off for sure, okay? All right, what we need now is I need to come in here, okay, with my undersleeve, yeah? Because if you remember, just grab a weight here. I've got to move this, shift this around a little bit. Here we go. If you remember, we cut the sleeve to be, or the lining to be the same size as the lining or as the sleeve itself, okay? So we added a 3 centimeter inlay. And so we have to sew the lining exactly the same way as we sewed the cloth, all right? Somewhere here, I had a beautiful piece of chalk all sharpened and ready to go. There it is. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, okay, is I'm going to just chalk in my inlay because I have to in fact, I should chalk it in on the right side. Yeah. Let's do that, shall we? Okay. All right. That's fine. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew both pieces together at once so that we can be more efficient on the machine. Because you know how much I love working on the machine, right? Yeah. Okay. So again, my lining is a little slippery, and I want to make sure it's lined up properly here, there, and there, which it is. Okay. We should have 3 centimeters. Okay. There we go. All right. So here, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to chalk that 3 centimeters right here so that we can see it. All right. Right here. So we can see, and the top, so we can see where that ends. And this will be my bottom. And just go ahead and I'll put in where my elbow is. Okay? Because what's going to happen is we're going to take the top sleeve, okay? And we have to match this like so, all right? So here, if I take my top sleeve, all I really need on the top sleeve, very honestly, is to know where my elbows are. And I should be good. Bring that up here. See, the thing that's tricky about your lining, there we go. You see that? I know. It's tricky, tricky. So my elbow should be about here and about here. Okay? That's all I really need. I know where my length is because I have my notches. So what we can do, all right, is we can come in here and we can take a few pins and we can match the lining at the elbow, okay, at the length here, at the length. Let's get that spot on. It's really important to get this spot on because you don't want the sleeve to be any bigger or smaller on the inside, okay? You want the lining to be the same exact shape. Otherwise, if you have too much, it's going to wrinkle up on the inside of the sleeve, right? And that's not going to be much fun. So here's my length. Here's my elbow. You can see I'm lining the raw edge up. And here I'm coming up here to the top. And that should match up perfectly right there as well, which it does. Okay? There, there, and there. Okay, so I'm just going to put a pin here at the top. Okay? And then just to make my life super easy when I'm sitting at the machine, so I don't have to think a whole lot, is I'm just going to go ahead and give myself a very simple 1 centimeter seam again. So I have that precise shape. Okay? I have exactly two pieces, the lining and the cloth, that are exactly the same size. That's the most important thing. They have to be the same size. Okay, so there's that. And I'm going to do the same thing here on the front of the sleeve. I'll just give myself a 1 centimeter seam. Okay? Just like that. So when we sit down and we put all this together, it's super simple. Super easy, super simple. Okay? There's that. And then here, we can do the same thing. See, we're going to be a little tough here. Going to just have a little bit of a tough time getting all of this to match. We weren't able to stretch it out quite as much as I would like. Well, there's not much to do about that, except maybe try and stretch it a little bit more, but I think we'll just have to make do with what we have. And I'm going to tell you what I'd rather do if I can't get it to stretch out perfect. It's quite short, actually. Well, I'm going to split the difference here, okay? And I'm just going to do the best I can with what I have. I might be able to stretch it out. You know what? Let's just get the, let's get this out again. Let's see if I can stretch this a bit, just individually. Yeah? It is quite short of matching. And the problem with that is if we can't get it to match at least a little bit better than it is, let's just get rid of these pins. We may have a big problem with having our sleeve, our top sleeve, be long enough, you see, to fit up and over. And we certainly don't want there to be any imbalance. So let's just see if I can get this. Put a little muscle behind it. Put a little muscle behind it here. Let's put that weight so it doesn't shift the towel. Just see if I can stretch it out a bit more. Because it is quite short. We're off quite a bit. Let's see if that helped. Let's see if that helped a bit. Oh, it actually did help quite a bit. Okay, that's much better actually. Okay, let's do the other piece. And it did help quite a bit. Let's see. There. Yeah. Okay. There and there. Let's see if I can just stretch it a tiny bit more. You know, sometimes we just gotta get in here and work it. Work it a little bit more. What can we do? You know, it doesn't always work out perfect, so we gotta come in and do it a little bit more. It's, okay. Well, there's quite a bit of ripple there now, isn't there? Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, yes, ma'am. All right, that's a little bit better there. And that is a bit better there. So I will take that victory. It's still a little off here, but not so much. I think what we can do is we can match the top, which is most important. And if we're a little bit off along the bottom, I'm not going to get myself all wrapped up over that because I still have plenty of length. Okay? So we'll just do our best with that. We're only going to be able to stretch the lining so much, unfortunately, okay? Before we just can't stretch it any more than it just won't give us any more. And try just a tiny bit more down here at the bottom, but it's only going to give us so much. And honestly, I don't think that even the water would help. Don't think so. Let's get this guy done. Let's do him. There's a big difference now, though, if you look at this piece compared to this piece and the amount that we've stretched it. So you see the difference there? In fact, I can probably grab and do just a little bit more here. Sometimes the closer you hold and turn, the more stretch you can get out of it. So now I have to be honest with you, I am pulling this quite aggressively. There we go. That's about as good as that's going to get. There's quite a bit of difference there between that and this, okay? So let's see if we can achieve the same here. All right. I gotta hold the towel with my body here. I'm pulling it quite hard. Okay. All right. Oi, 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 oi. Stretchy little bastard. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that is going to be the best we can ask of our little piece of lining here without totally giving him a big mess to deal with. Yeah? Just press this guy out a little bit. All right. Oh my goodness. Just get some of those wrinkles out of him without taking any of our stretch out. Those are the worst too because they're the hardest to get out. All right. Okay. We will deal with it. We will deal with it. We have plenty of opportunity to press our lining. Okay? All right, let's get back to it. So, as you can see, working with our lining is not always the easiest. When is it? Honestly, when is lining ever easy to work with? It's just not. Just not. All right, so let's get back to this here. Let's work on the front first, because I believe we've gotten this pretty close. So I'm going to pin it here at the top. All right. And we'll follow this down, and we'll just hope that we've got all this pretty close. Pretty close. I think it'll be a little easier when I get on the machine. We'll just do the best we can and make the most. So see, I'm doing quite a few pins here so I can take that curve that I've created and distribute it onto the undersleeve, okay? So we are off, but not quite as bad. We're off maybe by 1 centimeter here at the bottom. And I'll live with that. I'll live with that, okay? So what we'll have to be careful of is now our length is a little bit different down here. We'll have to make sure that we keep that difference here at the back, okay? So we don't want our, yeah. There we go. Okay, that'll be fine. Here and here. Okay, that'll be all right. Our front will just be off a tiny bit, and we will live. We will live to see another day. Yeah? So we have a couple of choices that we could make here with this, okay? This being so short, there's a couple things we could do. And I might just go back and refine this a little bit. In fact, I will. I'm going to make one last executive decision here, but let me get the back on first, okay? We can take that difference that we're experiencing and we can just distribute it between the front or the top and the bottom of the sleeve, okay? In other words, we can short ourselves a little bit at the top and we can short ourselves a little bit at the bottom. And so I think that's what I'm going to do because I don't want my sleeve to twist on the inside, my lining, okay? So here, if I'm going to be off a little bit, I'll be off a little bit at the bottom and I'll be off a little bit at the top. And the whole world will continue to revolve, okay? And we will get our sleeve in just fine. And it's not going to be perfect, but it'll be close enough to perfect, okay? So that's how we have to go about handling these little issues here and there. Put a little muscle into it. Put a little ingenuity into it. All right? And we should be in good shape. So we're just, like I said, we're just going to be off a little tiny bit at the top and a little tiny bit at the bottom. Okay? But we will have, if we distributed it all to the top or all to the bottom, we risk twisting our lining on the inside. And we don't want that to happen, okay? We just don't want that to happen. All right, so let's get in here and do the same thing. Let's line this up nicely, okay? And chalk in that nice 3 centimeters. There we go. Chalk in that nice 3 centimeters. Okay, here and here in the back, so we know where all that is. Sure it's nice and even. Okay, there's our length, there's our elbow, top, I got that. All right, we'll get this guy in. Let's right away just put our guidelines in very nicely before we get it all pinned. We'll be all set and ready to go. Ready to go. Of course, these little curves don't make chalking a straight line very easy, especially on lining. Yeah. There we go. That's a little bit better. All right. But see, once we have this done, the thing that's really nice is we can sit down on the machine and we can just, Get this buzzed out really quick. I mean, really quick. No muss, no fuss. Just knock it out. Now, if you wanted to baste these two pieces together, if you felt more comfortable basting your lining together instead of pinning it, by all means, please do. I would do exactly the same thing that I'm doing here and give yourself your guidelines for sewing, et cetera, and then just baste a little bit off of that line so that your basting stitches don't get involved with your machine stitches. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. But you can definitely do that, especially, if you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of experience working with lining and you don't have a lot of experience with the machine. Why cause yourself a bunch of frustration? Take a couple extra minutes to just baste everything. And, that's what I did. When I first started out, I would baste my lining because this is just way too slippery. Just when you're starting out. And, I tried being a hot shot and just getting on the machine. And then what ended up happening was I ended up messing it all up. And I got even more frustrated having to take all of the machine stitches out and start again. Just not worth it. Okay. So here and here, again, we're just going to split the difference a little bit, right there. We'll put several pins in here just so we can distribute this nice. Okay. Hold it all together well. Most important thing is make sure that your edges are matching. Yeah. Nicely. The most important thing about doing the sleeve lining is ensuring that the lining is the same size as the cloth itself, okay? All right, well, after all of that drama, okay, we're ready to get on the machine and sew these two pieces together. So I'll meet you over there in just 1 second. All right, so here we are, and I'm working on the inside of the sleeve, okay, right here, the inseam, if you will. And so I have my tension appropriate for the lining. I've got my stitch set at 2.5 out of 5, so a nice medium stitch. And a centimeter, since my machine is in inches, but a centimeter is approximately 3/8 of an inch. So if I bring my cloth between 1/4 and 1/2, I'm just about there. All right, so we're going to come in, and of course we're going to get our needles or pins out of the way here. All right, and sticking to the shape of the sleeve, and just very carefully, very gently, very easily working. I put a lot of pins on this seam, basically because this was where, we tried to stretch the top sleeve, and unfortunately, we could only get so much stretch out of it. So I put a lot of pins in, trying to distribute the two pieces evenly with each other, okay? Just FYI. The most important thing with lining, no matter whether you want to baste it together, pin it together, however you want to go about machining it, okay? The most important thing with lining is to make sure that your edges are together, okay? That both of your edges are lined up properly, okay? And that all of your balance lines are matching. So in this particular case, I made sure that my length was matching. I made sure that my elbow was matching. I made sure that that the top was matching, okay? And so here we have our inlay at the back of the sleeve, okay? And again, I'm just going to drop my presser foot down here and just give this a couple little back stitches and come forward. Here I didn't need as many pins. Just wanted to kind of hold things from sliding around. And of course here I gave myself a nice guideline to follow since I can't see the guide on the machine because I have my inlay in the way, right? So here all I'm doing is, you can see I have a guideline here where the inlay is, and I'm just making sure that the raw edge is lined up nicely. So it's not terribly difficult. You know, I think when you get everything lined up, that's the hard part. Once you get on the machine, it should be pretty straightforward, right? Pretty straightforward. All right. So it'll just come down here and done. So that's all there is to that, machining. I'll do the other one offline here. I don't think you need to watch me machine both sleeves. I think you all know how to do that. So we'll meet you back over at the table and we'll take this to the next step. Okay, so we're back from the machine, and what we're going to do, okay, is we're going to baste our lining into the sleeve. And what we want to accomplish in doing that is adding a little bit of ease, okay? It's really important that we have ease in the sleeve so there's no pulling. The other thing that's really important is when we went in and we cut our lining, if you remember, we notched certain balance points. So we notched the length and we also notched the top of the sleeve, both the undersleeve and the top sleeve lining, where we left that extra 2.5 centimeters, okay? So what we want to do here is we want to start by turning our sleeve inside out, okay, just like that, and have it so that the undersleeve is facing up, okay? The next thing is we want to turn our lining inside out, and we want to match the lining, okay, to the undersleeve as well, okay? So it should look something like this. If you turn it, you see, here's my undersleeve lining, and it's matching right up to the undersleeve cloth, just like so, okay? Just like that. Okay, now, the next thing that we want to do, okay, is we want to make sure that our length is matching up here at the bottom, okay? And we want to match the inlay on the lining to the inlay on the sleeve, okay? On the sleeve cloth, all right? Just like that. And my length is lining up here at the bottom, okay? Now, I told you that we have to add a bit of ease, okay? So if you look, my notch here that I cut on my lining, okay, matches up to my notch, or excuse me, the top of my undersleeve, or excuse me, yes, the top of my undersleeve here, okay? So what I want to do is I actually want to bring that notch up, okay, at a half a centimeter. That's all. Actually, I'm going to bring it up a centimeter, okay? So I'm going to bring it up a centimeter, okay? And then what I'm going to do is, obviously this is coming up a half centimeter too at the bottom, or excuse me, a centimeter, all right? So we're going to do that, and if we want, just for the moment, because lining is very slippery, so just for the moment, till I get some needle, my basting needle and some thread, just going to check and make sure I have that correct. Yes, okay. So then we're going to get a nice basting needle and a fair amount of basting thread because we're going to be basting the two pieces together here, but this is going to be a permanent baste now, okay? This is not going to come out at all. So we want to get a fair amount of thread here, okay? All right. So I'm going to start. I want to give myself some room, obviously, to turn my lining up here at the bottom. So I'm not going to start all the way here at the length. I'm going to come up a little bit, okay? Start right where my pin is, I suppose, and that should work out just fine. Let me just double check that my lining hasn't slipped out of position here. It's all so slippery. Yeah. Yeah, that's good right there. Okay. So I'm going to start right about here. And what I want to do, okay, this can be a little tricky, all right? But what I want to do is I want to baste my lining by matching the seam on my lining to the seam on my sleeve, okay? So here's the seam on my lining, and I'm matching that to the seam on my sleeve. You see that? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tack this off a couple of times. Now, what we want to make sure of is that we're not coming into the lining with our basting thread, okay? We're staying in the seam allowance, okay? And we're not coming into the sleeve because we don't want to see our stitches on the outside, okay? So I'm just going to give this, I'm going to tack this a couple of times because I want it to hold real nice, okay? All right, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my finger here between the lining and the sleeve itself, and I'm coming up maybe about 3 centimeters, okay? And what I want to do is I just want to slide the lining a smidgen, okay? So I'm keeping, if you can see here, I'm keeping the cloth, if I bring the two together like so, okay? I'm keeping the cloth nice and straight, but I'm just pushing the lining forward just a tiny bit to add that ease along the seam line, okay, on the lining. And again, now I'm going to come in and I'm going to match the seam on the lining to the seam on the sleeve, staying in the seam allowance itself. And I'm just going to tack that again. Now we don't want this to be tight, okay? Don't pull the basting thread tight, okay? So just tack that now like so. All right? Just like that. And what you should see is just a little bit of ease here in the lining, between the lining and the actual cloth, okay? And we're going to continue just like that all the way up the rest of the sleeve until we get to maybe a couple centimeters from the top. Now, if you need to put a little bit of moisture on your finger to help you, you can do that. Okay, just to push the lining slightly, just a little bit. What we don't want is we don't want to push it too much because we don't want to have, if you put too much ease in between each stitch, okay, you're going to end up with ripples on the outside of your sleeve. And you will not be happy with that at all right? And then the other thing that you want to really concentrate on is getting as close to the actual seam itself without going through to the outside, okay? So other than that, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy, okay? All right. And actually, because we have a cuff on this, okay, it's really super easy because we don't have to deal with, messing around with a vent and all that stuff. It's really easy, okay? So here, again, I'm holding the cloth straight. I'm making sure that my seam is lined up, the lining seam is lined up with the seam on the cloth. And I'm coming in and I'm getting as close to that cloth as I possibly, or seam as I can on the cloth. And then basting again, adding that little bit of ease in between and just tacking that down. Okay, here we go. And we just keep continuing right up the sleeve, doing that right up the sleeve. I think the most challenging part of this is just keeping everything lined up, okay? And making sure you've got the seams lined up nicely. So here, just a small amount of ease, just a tiny bit right there, okay? And you should be able to see here in between, you should see, just if I pulled this back, you see that little bit of ease? Let me see if I can show you. See that little bit of ease? That's just gathering in between the stitches here. Just a tiny bit, okay? Just a tiny bit. So at the end of the day, we do this so that the lining in our sleeve feels comfortable. It's not pulling. Because it's going to be, if you think about it, it's going to be attached to the top of the inside of the jacket, right? And it's going to be attached to the bottom at the length. And if this is too tight, what's going to happen is you're going to have pulling inside your sleeve, and that's going to feel very, very uncomfortable. You will not like that much at all. Okay, so just a couple more stitches here. I just want to get this a little closer to my seam here. There we go. Very good. Very good. And again, each time I take a, my stitch length here is about 3-4 centimeters, I think. And so every time I take a little stitch, I just tack it, okay? I'm just tacking. So I have stitch, tack, all the way up. So this is a lovely way to put everything together. Just make sure. I want to make sure you can see what I'm doing at the same time, making sure I've got enough ease here. There we go. Get that a little closer. Sometimes well, obviously the lining is slippery, right? So it can be a little challenge to get real close to that seam on the cloth. All right, let's see where we are here. Okay, so I'm going to do just maybe one more stitch here. But the most important thing is I want to make sure that when I get to that last stitch, okay, I've got the top, my little notch here, should be sitting right at the top of my cloth. And it looks like we're going to end up exactly there, okay? So we'll see if we need one stitch or two. We do want to leave a little bit of room. We don't want to stitch this all the way to the top, because if we do, it's going to make it very difficult when we go to put the sleeve onto the jacket, okay? We don't want the lining getting in the way of us basting and backstitching the sleeve on. So we have to leave a little bit of room here for this too. There we go. And I think I'm right spot on. Yeah, right spot on. So that's good. And I'm going to leave that amount. So I'm going to tack this one more time. Okay, just to make sure this is, and maybe one more just for good luck. Just to make sure, especially because this area is going to get a little bit of stress when we go to put the sleeve in. And I just want to make sure that that baste is not going to come out. Okay, so there's that. Now we have to do the same thing on the inside of the sleeve. But this time, because we have to work from the bottom up because we're distributing that ease, okay? We've got the ease already built into this side because we put it into the back side of the arm. So double check and make sure that you have a centimeter of ease here at the top. That's really important because you don't want the lining to be twisted inside the sleeve at all either, okay? So we're going to start with the cloth facing us this time. And again, I'm coming up a bit from the bottom, and I'm just doing the same thing I did before. I'm coming in at the seam on my cloth through to the seam on my lining, making sure I stay within the seam allowance, okay? And I'm going to tack this a couple of times here to make sure that this stays in real nice, okay? There and there, like so. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing, where now I'm going to hold the cloth nice and flat, and I'm just going to push the lining forward very slightly. In fact, I think it's probably easier for you to see it on this side than the other. So I started out with everything nice and taut, and now I just push the lining. See, just that tiny little bit, just that smidgen, okay? And then come forward and baste and tack this guy together, making sure you stay within the seam allowance and you don't make your stitch too tight, okay? It'll come up again. And this side, you know, it's shorter, obviously. It's not as long as the back of the sleeve. So it won't require as many stitches, yeah? So here, nice and taut, take the lining, matching up the seams, boop, just push it forward a smidgen, just like that, and then come in and baste the two together and tack it. Pretty cool. I really like this method of providing ease in the sleeve. I think it's very simple, tried and true way of ensuring that our sleeve is not tight. The lining at least. You know, that's how we get this really nice, the sleeve to fall so nice, because the lining in the sleeve is really part of the support of the sleeve, yeah? So we want to make sure that we get it in properly and that it lays real nice. Okay, and then here, I think, let's see, I'm going to make one more smaller stitch because I'm not quite there. This will do it. So I'm just going to come forward just a little, not quite as far here because again, I have a little bit more ease to distribute, but I don't want to impede getting the top of the sleeve or the sleeve onto the jacket. Okay, so there, there, this will be our last stitch, and we'll just baste that real nice now. A couple of tacks, keep it in line. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so that was pretty simple. Pretty simple. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and turn, again, put your hand into the lining, okay, and pull the sleeve through to turn it inside out. Because what we want to do now, okay, is we want to baste, first of all, we want to make sure that everything's lining up real nice. Yes, okay. What I want to do now, you see, is I want to baste the lining onto the cuff, okay? So I want to bring this up here, okay? Turn this in so that it sits real nice on the cuff here, okay? So what we need to do is no different than what we did before. If you remember, we took our chalk, okay, and we chalked a line, oops, we chalked a line. If I line up my ruler, okay, right on the length of the sleeve. Now it's important because remember, we've got a slant to our sleeve, and we want to make sure that we maintain that, okay? So if I just use my ruler and line it up with the sleeve length here, okay, what I can do is I can chalk a nice line where the length of the sleeve is. Okay, you see that? Perfect. And then if I turn this over, I can do the same thing. Just pull the lining back and find it, because it won't lay perfect, right? They don't lay perfect on each other. So we're going to put that, chalk that line there. It's not pretty, but it's okay. At least I know where it is, okay? So there's that. So now I'm going to pull my lining up out of the way. And here, okay, if you remember, we have I believe, 3 centimeters of inlay, okay? And so what I want to do is I want to come in, pardon me, I want to grab a little blue chalk so you can see this. Oh, there we go. Without taking the whole atelier down with me. Mannequins are flying around. Irons are falling off the table. And what I want to do is I want to come up off of the edge here, okay, 1.5 centimeters, and make a line, okay? Is this sounding familiar to you again? We did this on the length when we turned up the length on the coat, okay? And here, same thing on this side, 1.5 centimeters up. So I just took 3 and divided it by 2. That's all I did. Super, super easy. You know, super, super easy. Okay, just going to need a little bit more thread here. And now what we can do is we can baste the lining in preparation at the length, in preparation for finishing. So what we'll do is we'll come in and we'll fell stitch the length here, okay? So pretty simple, pretty simple. So what we have to do is now match our seams nicely, okay? This is important. And I like to start at a seam here. And turn that up on my chalk line. You see? So where I chalk this, I'm turning it up. Make sure that your inlay's falling properly where it should, okay? It should match that pretty easily. And I'm just matching my seam. And I'm going to baste this down. I'm going to come off the edge of the lining about 0.5 centimeter. Just to give myself enough room to fell stitch, okay? Pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward. So it's easier to turn the lining on all one side here. Let's turn it all up and in if we can. Okay, just like that. Much better. This is why it's really important when we cut this lining that we made sure that we stayed true to the shape of the, remember how we took and we flipped and flipped and flipped the pattern so that we didn't have, when we turned up the vent, not the vent, the turn up, okay, that it wasn't tight. And so we had to have that same shape on the lining so it wouldn't be tight, okay? So you'll know right away whether you were successful in doing that. Okay. your cuff, excuse me. For some reason, that word was not coming to my head, to my mind. So all I'm doing is I'm matching the blue line, okay, on the cloth to my chalk line on my lining, and I'm just basting it down, okay? Just like that. Just like that. Keeping a nice straight line and just adding a very small amount of ease in between each stitch. Again, we don't want this to be tight around the cuff at all. It should not be, okay? It should be nice. It should have just a small amount of ease. Just a small amount. So you have ease at the inner sleeve here at that seam. You've got ease at the back, and you're going to have ease here around the cuff. And it'll look very beautiful. And our little bit of blue chalk will wear off here eventually. And it's on the inside, so we won't see it. So this sleeve, once we get this all basted on here nicely, this sleeve is ready to be basted into the jacket. Oh my goodness gracious. How exciting is that? My God, I'm excited. I'm very excited to show you how to hand sew a sleeve into this beautiful coat. It was the first time I tried to do it. It was a bit intimidating, without a doubt. But now that you are familiar with the dynamics of a sleeve, okay, I assure you that basting this sleeve into the jacket and setting it by hand, I think that once you accomplish that and you see the difference between hand tailoring a sleeve and using a machine, there is no comparison. You will be absolutely addicted. I'm telling you, you'll never go back to setting a sleeve by a machine again. And if you do, I'm going to have to ask what the heck happened. Because you just can't achieve the type of results that we do by hand tailoring the sleeve. So that's what we're going to be up to next. So I just have a couple stitches here to finish this beautiful lining up inside our sleeve. Okay. Obviously, you know, because we've got this basted up a 1/2 centimeter here, it's not going to lay flat, and that's okay. Once we come in and we fell stitch all around this edge, okay, it'll lay, we'll be able to push it down and lay it out nice and flat and press it. And it's going to look beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So let's take a look at how we did, okay? So here, if I turn my sleeve inside out now, we have a beautiful sleeve working here. It has a lovely shape. Now, how can we tell if we did it right? If you look on the outside of your sleeve, once you turn it in, you know, right side out with the lining in, if you have bumps along here, if this is like womp, 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 no, you put too much ease in the lining. Okay, same here. If you turn it and you're looking at this area here and it's like wavy, you've put too much ease in, okay? And you'll have to go back in and take a little bit of that ease out and redo it because you don't want to spend all that time making a beautiful sleeve, okay, just to have it be all ripply and icky. Okay, you certainly don't want that. So this is a good looking sleeve. This is a nice looking sleeve. It's got a nice little curve to it. We've got enough lining all around to bring that up and into the jacket once that's finished. You know, if I just slide it on my arm, not that you can really tell, I've got a sweater on and all that, but this feels very comfortable. And it's perfect length for what I wanted. So I'm really excited about that. I think that's going to look Really beautiful. Yeah, look at that. We did a beautiful sleeve with a cuff, right? Well, let's get this bad boy in, shall we? Great. Thank you for joining me in the atelier today. If you've enjoyed this lesson, please like, share, and subscribe. I do appreciate it. And if you have any thoughts or questions, please leave them in the comments section below. I love hearing from you, and I answer every single one. In my next lesson, I'm so excited. Drum roll, please, because we are going to be setting our sleeves and we're going to be doing it by hand. You're not going to want to miss that lesson. That's what's happening next time in the atelier.